None of them saw him again. For the next 7 years, he wandered Western Europe. This was the early 1770s, and the pilgrim tracks that once connected the continent had fallen into disuse. Benoit Joseph Labre lived nearer to an age of steam than an age of sacred travel. Yet he journeyed on foot between Einsiedeln and Rome, Loreto and Santiago de Compostela. The boy too weak for the monastery covered 30,000 kilometres with no money in his pocket and no cloak for his back. His days were endless hardship. He ate dry bread or the herbs that grew wild by the roadside. He slept on the ground or, when offered a roof for the night, refused a bed and slept on the stairs. Imitating the fools for Christ, those medieval mystics who behaved like lunatics and animals, Benoit Joseph made himself wretched for fear of pride. According to his confessor, Father Marconi, this humility was born of love. The pilgrim so loved his fellow men that he hoped his austerities might atone for their sins. But was it love that first pushed him away from home? Looking at the cot where he slept, I could think of another reason. Ever since he was a boy, Benoit Joseph had dreamt of life in a monastery. The adult world rejected him, thus he decided to live always as a child, a pilgrim Peter Pan. Well, perhaps. Or perhaps I wanted the saint's journey to explain my own somehow. For Benoit Joseph Labre was the patron not only of pilgrims, but also of vagrants, unmarried men, and the mentally ill. And, standing in his bedroom that afternoon, I felt his story had something to teach me. The alcove was dim now, and there was not one sound in all the house. No creaking doors, no heaving floors, the whole place made mute by dust. Yet I had a vague sense that I was no longer alone here, so I left the attic and ducked down the stairs. Then I slipped out into the mist. My first pilgrimage started on a midsummer morning 6 months earlier. I set off from the flat where I was living in London, followed the Thames east, and joined the medieval route to Canterbury. It was a surprising thing to do, as for much of the year I had been afraid to leave my room. When I was 23, I had a nervous breakdown. Afterwards, I was frightened of the city, of lunchtime crowds and rush-hour trains and the angry, anxious streets. I went to work and sat senseless at my desk. I went to doctors and psychiatrists, counsellors and therapists. Otherwise, I lay in bed, turned from the window, my thoughts hurting. 1 year on, the fear was lifting. In early summer, I was taken off antidepressants. As the days got warmer, I wanted to go outside, and that June, I decided on a walk. Canterbury was a whim, the walk at the beginning of English literature. The forecast was good, meaning I did not think to bring a waterproof jacket or buy maps, trusting my phone instead. That Wednesday was the solstice. Perfect. Everything went wrong. For 2 days I marched from dawn until dusk, covering almost 100 kilometres, a grim total for someone who last hiked at school. On Tuesday, I went so far off course that I had to catch a train to my hostel. On Wednesday, I was soaked and sunburnt in the space of an hour and spent the entire afternoon trudging down the A2, eyes harsh from exhaust fumes. When I got to Canterbury, my heels were bruised and my socks clotted with blood. Yet I do not remember the pain. I remember lying on the grass beneath the cathedral, watching the daylight last into night, with a sense of relief so complete it was like healing. For a long time, my world had been closing in, smaller and smaller, until it was no bigger than a cell. Walking made the world wide again. A figure carrying a staff and scrip was etched onto a stone by the cathedral's southern porch. Around him was written La Via Francigena, Canterbury to Rome. At that point, I knew nothing of the holy road to St. Peter's, but as I lay on the grass, an idea took shape in my mind. Why not keep walking? Why not leave England and walk to Italy, and then keep going, to the edge of Europe, on and on to the world's most sacred city?